Right now, it's still kind of chilly out there.
We already have a very pretty sunrise that's underway, and we are going to see a lot of sunshine out there for today.
If a nuclear weapon were to hit a major U.S. city like New York, the consequences would be devastating, not just for New York, but for the entire world. Such a catastrophic event would ripple through every aspect of life, and it's important to understand the magnitude of destruction and the long-lasting effects. To give a sense of the sheer scale of devastation, let's first look at what would happen if a nuclear bomb similar to the one dropped on Hiroshima during World War II were detonated over New York City. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima, known as Little Boy, had an explosive yield of about 15 kilotons of TNT. It caused mass destruction and killed an estimated 140,000 people. But New York City is vastly larger and more densely populated than Hiroshima was in 1945. The impact of even a relatively small nuclear bomb like Little Boy would be much more severe in a city of this size. The explosion would create an intense fireball, instantly vaporizing everything within a radius of about 200 meters or 650 feet. That means that all buildings, people, and infrastructure in this zone would be completely destroyed in a matter of seconds. We're talking about a portion of Manhattan simply being wiped off the map. The temperature inside the fireball would be so hot that it would melt steel and turn concrete into dust. Outside this immediate zone of vaporization, the destruction would continue. The blast wave would expand outward, demolishing buildings and throwing debris for hundreds of meters. This shockwave would cause severe damage to structures up to 340 meters away, or over 1,000 feet. Skyscrapers that define the New York skyline could be reduced to rubble. The area affected by the blast would be massive, with windows shattered as far as 4 kilometers or 2.5 miles from ground zero. Beyond the blast itself, the heat generated by the explosion would ignite fires across a huge area. These fires would merge into a firestorm, consuming everything in its path. People caught within several kilometers of the explosion could suffer third-degree burns, which could be fatal without immediate medical attention. To put it into perspective, someone standing as far as 11 kilometers or 7 miles away from the blast could still experience life-threatening burns. Then there's the issue of radioactive fallout. When a nuclear bomb detonates, it throws radioactive particles high into the atmosphere. These particles would begin to fall back to the ground over the next hours and days, creating a deadly rain of radiation. Areas well beyond New York City could be affected, depending on weather conditions and wind patterns. The fallout could contaminate food and water supplies, leading to long-term health effects like cancer for those exposed. But the physical destruction and loss of life aren't the only consequences. The city's infrastructure would be obliterated, leaving survivors without access to electricity, clean water, medical care, or emergency services. Hospitals would be overwhelmed, and transportation systems would be paralyzed. Evacuation would be nearly impossible, and rescue operations would struggle to get through the rubble and fire. Psychological trauma among survivors would be widespread. The shock of witnessing such unprecedented destruction, combined with the fear of radiation exposure, would leave deep mental scars. Many survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and the same would be true in New York. Families would be torn apart, and entire communities would be displaced. Now, imagine if the bomb were far larger, such as one of the more modern nuclear weapons developed by the US or Russia. The United States and Russia possess the largest nuclear arsenals in the world, with some warheads being many times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Take, for example, Russia's RS-28 Sarmat missile, known as Satan II. This intercontinental ballistic missile can carry up to 15 separate nuclear warheads, each capable of delivering destruction on a massive scale. A single Satan II missile, with a maximum yield of 15 megatons, is nearly 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. If such a weapon were detonated over New York City, The results would be unthinkable. The fireball would be so large that it would vaporize everything within a radius of 4 kilometers, or about 2.5 miles. The heat would cause third-degree burns up to 34 kilometers, or 21 miles away, extending far beyond the city limits. In this scenario, Manhattan would be obliterated, along with parts of Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. The sheer scale of the destruction would make any form of organized response almost impossible. Even areas as far away as New Jersey or Long Island could see widespread devastation and fallout. Although Washington, D.C., as the nation's capital and the center of political and military leadership, would be a likely primary target in a global conflict, New York City is also considered a significant target. Why? The goal of maximizing civilian casualties and creating global panic. New York is not just a U.S. city. It is a global financial hub and cultural icon. A direct hit on New York would send shockwaves through the global economy, creating chaos far beyond the physical destruction. In a worst-case scenario, a nuclear conflict involving cities like New York would have far-reaching consequences. The global economy would likely collapse. Trade, travel, and communication networks could be severely disrupted. The human cost would be unfathomable. Millions could lose their lives, either in the immediate blast or from the long-term effects of radiation and disease. Ultimately, the use of nuclear weapons would change the world forever. It's not just the destruction of one city, it's the loss of countless lives, the end of life as we know it for survivors, and the possible unraveling of human civilization. While nuclear deterrence and arms control have helped prevent such a disaster so far, the existence of these weapons continues to pose a grave threat. It's a reminder that the world must continue working towards disarmament and peace to ensure that no city, whether New York or any other, ever has to face such a catastrophe.